The cat and the unconditional love of Christmas. The streets of New Orleans sparkled with Christmas lights, creating a magical contrast against the dark winter sky. The soft sound of jazz floated through the air, blending with the night sounds of the city. Amidst this festive backdrop, a small street cat named Oliver watched everything with his attentive, curious eyes. Oliver was a grey feline with white patches, small and agile. His fur, though a bit scruffy from life on the streets, still held a healthy shine. His large, expressive green eyes reflected both the city's vitality and a profound loneliness he carried within. On that cold December night, Oliver wandered through the French Quarter, the historic heart of New Orleans. The smell of hot food wafting from the restaurants made his stomach growl. For days, he had eaten nothing substantial, surviving on crumbs and scraps he found in alleys. As he walked down Rue Royale, Oliver spotted something that caught his attention. In front of an antique shop, an imposing guard dog stood sentinel. It was Max, a golden Labrador with a majestic build, known for his stern demeanor and intimidating gaze. Max sat rigidly, his dark brown eyes scanning the street for any signs of threat. His fur glimmered under the colorful lights of the Christmas decorations, giving him an almost ethereal appearance. A leather collar with a golden tag indicated his status as the shop's guardian. Driven by a mix of curiosity and loneliness, Oliver decided to approach. He took a few hesitant steps toward Max, his heart racing. When he was just a few feet away, Max suddenly turned his head, glaring at Oliver with a fierce look. "What do you want here, street cat?" Max growled, his deep voice echoing through the nearly empty street. "This isn't a place for strays like you." "Nah, sir." Oliver stepped back in surprise at the hostility, but he didn't let it intimidate him completely. I just wanted to say hello," he meowed softly. "It's Christmas Eve, after all." Max huffed, turning his snout away. "Christmas? What would a stray like you know about Christmas? Go away before I decide you're a threat." Oliver's heart sank at the harsh words, but something in the loneliness he saw in Max's eyes kept him from running away. Instead, he sat at a safe distance, his green eyes locked on the dog. "You seem lonely," Oliver said after a moment of silence. "I know how that feels. Maybe we could be lonely together." Max looked at Oliver with a mixture of surprise and distrust. For a brief moment, his tough exterior seemed to waver, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't need company, especially from a street cat. Now get out of here before I lose my patience." Realizing he wouldn't make any progress that night, Oliver nodded sadly and walked away. But as he returned to the alley he called home, an idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps with patience and kindness, he could melt Max's icy heart. In the days that followed, Oliver returned to the shop every day. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a colorful feather he found in the park, a piece of red ribbon that reminded him of Christmas, or even a bit of bread he managed to snag from a kind pigeon. He would leave these items near Max without saying a word, then sit at a respectful distance. At first, Max completely ignored the offerings and Oliver's presence. But as days went by, Oliver noticed subtle changes. A quick glance of curiosity at the day's gift, a slight wag of his tail when Oliver arrived, a barely perceptible relaxation in his rigid posture. A week before Christmas, on a particularly cold night, Oliver arrived trembling at the shop. Max, surprising both of them, spoke first. "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked, his voice less hostile than usual. "Don't you see we're different? This can't work." Oliver, smiling softly despite the cold, replied, "Because everyone deserves a friend, Max, especially at Christmas. And sometimes the best friendships are born from differences." At that moment, something shifted in Max's gaze. A spark of understanding, perhaps even hope, glimmered in his eyes. And so, on that cold December night, in front of an antique shop in New Orleans, the beginning of an improbable friendship was born that would change both their lives forever. As the days passed, the relationship between Oliver and Max began to develop in subtle but significant ways. The city of New Orleans, with its rich tapestry of sounds and smells, served as the perfect backdrop for this unlikely friendship. Oliver, born on the streets of the French Quarter, carried with him the resilience and free spirit characteristic of the city. His knowledge of the alleys and backstreets was vast, acquired through years of wandering the area. Despite the hard life, Oliver maintained an optimistic attitude, always believing that better days would come. One night, as he snuggled close to Max, Oliver shared a bit of his story. "You know, Max, I wasn't always a street cat," he softly meowed. "When I was a kitten, I had a family of cats in a colorful house in Marigny, but one day, during Mardi Gras, I got lost in the crowd of paws and tails. I never found my way back." Max, surprising himself, felt a pang of compassion. "That must have been hard," he replied, his voice softer than usual. Oliver nodded. "It was, but I learned a lot on the streets. I learned about the kindness of strangers, about the music that never stops in this city, and about finding beauty even in tough times." Max, in turn, had a very different story. Born in a prestigious kennel, he was trained from an early age to be a guard dog. His imposing stature and rigorous discipline made him perfect for the job at the antique shop. "I've never known another life besides this," Max confided in Oliver one night. "I've always been taught that my duty is to protect, to be strong, to never show weakness." Oliver looked at him with understanding. "But being strong doesn't mean being lonely, Max. Sometimes true strength lies in opening your heart." As they talked, the two animals began to discover more about each other's worlds. Oliver took Max through his stories to the vibrant streets of New Orleans. He spoke of the birds that sang jazz in the trees, the aroma of food wafting from restaurants, and the ghost stories whispered by the older cats. Max, in turn, shared what he observed from the shop. He talked about the ancient objects that arrived, each with its own scent and story. He recounted the interesting animals that passed through the shop, from eccentric collector squirrels to curious tourist pigeons. One day, an old saxophonist cat stopped in front of the store. His instrument, worn with age but shining under the streetlights, caught their attention. When the cat began to play, a soft and melancholic melody filled the air. "This is blues," Max explained to Oliver. "The dogs at the shop sometimes howl this tune at night." Oliver closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. "It's as if it tells a story of longing and hope at the same time," he softly meowed. In that moment, something changed between them. The music, so intrinsically linked to the soul of New Orleans, seemed to dissolve the last barriers between the street cat and the guard dog. As Christmas approached, the streets came alive. Animals of all kinds mingled, all caught up in the festive spirit. Oliver and Max watched as decorations were hung by the birds, lights were lit by fireflies, and the scent of holiday food was brought by the rats on their kitchen forays. "I never really understood Christmas," Max admitted one night. "For me, it was just another day of guarding." Oliver smiled gently. "Christmas is about connection, Max. About opening our hearts and seeing the magic around us. Maybe this year we can discover that together." "Indeed, need to." As the city prepared for the festivities, Oliver and Max continued their journey of mutual discovery. Each day brought a new understanding, a new perspective, and slowly, without fully realizing it, they were not only getting to know each other, but also rediscovering themselves and the world around them. The friendship between Oliver and Max grew, but not without its challenges. One cold December night brought a new obstacle that would test the bonds that had just formed between the street cat and the guard dog. Old Rat Beauregard, the owner of the antique shop, arrived earlier than usual. His whiskers trembled with worry as he approached Max. "Max, my faithful friend," squeaked Mr. Beauregard, his voice quivering. "We need to be more vigilant than ever." There have been a series of thefts in the neighborhood. Valuable antiques have been taken from other shops by a gang of thieving cats. Max felt the weight of responsibility increase on his shoulders. He looked at Oliver, who was hiding in the nearby shadows, listening intently. The dog found himself torn between his duty and his new friendship. When Mr. Beauregard entered the shop, Max turned to Oliver with a serious expression. "Oliver, I think you shouldn't come here anymore," he said, his voice heavy with conflict. "With these thefts happening, I can't afford to have distractions. My duty is to protect this shop." Oliver felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over him. "Max, don't you trust me? I thought we were friends." "Friends?" Max replied, his voice hardening. "We're a guard dog and a street cat. How can we be friends? I have a job to do, Oliver. I can't risk everything for this." Max's words hit Oliver like a physical blow. The small cat recoiled, hurt and confused. "I understand," he softly meowed before disappearing into the night. In the days that followed, Oliver kept his distance from the shop. He wandered the streets of New Orleans, his heart heavy with Max's rejection. The Christmas lights, which once seemed so bright and full of promise, now felt cold and distant. Max, for his part, was determined to fulfill his duty with even more fervor. He patrolled the front of the shop tirelessly, his eyes alert for any suspicious movement. But at night, when everything was quiet, he found himself searching for the familiar figure of Oliver in the shadows. A week before Christmas, the tension in the neighborhood reached its peak. 2 more shops had been robbed, and fear hung in the air like a thick fog. Mr. Beauregard began to sleep in the shop, fearing it would be the next target. It was on one of those nights that the inevitable happened. Max was on his usual watch when he heard a noise coming from the back of the shop. He moved silently, ready to confront the intruder. To his surprise, he found himself face to face, not with a thief, but with Oliver. The cat was panting, his eyes wide with fear. "Max!" Oliver exclaimed. "You need to come with me now. The thieving cats! They're planning to rob the shop tonight." Max hesitated, torn between his duty to stay and protect the shop and the urgency in Oliver's voice. "How do you know this?" he asked, suspicious. "I heard them planning in the alley behind Café du Monde," Oliver explained quickly. "They thought they were alone, but I was there, looking for scraps." "Max, please, you have to believe me." The guard dog was conflicted. His loyalty to Mr. Beauregard and the shop struggled against the trust he had developed in Oliver. I can't leave my post," he said, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Oliver looked at Max with determination. "Then I'll go alone. I'll try to delay them somehow." "But Max, remember, sometimes protecting means more than just standing still. Sometimes it means trusting and taking action." With those words, Oliver dashed into the night, leaving Max in a whirlwind of emotions. The guard dog looked at the shop, then at the dark street, and back at the path Oliver had taken. In that moment, Max had to make a choice. Stay and potentially watch the shop get robbed, or trust Oliver and act even if it meant leaving his post. It was a decision that could change everything, not just for the shop, but for his friendship with Oliver and for his own understanding of what it meant to be a true guardian. With his heart racing and his mind in conflict, Max took one last look at the shop before making his decision. Whatever he chose, he knew that nothing would be the same after this night. As Max wrestled with his decision, a series of events unfolded throughout the city. In the alley behind Café du Monde, a group of 3 cats gathered in the shadows. They were the thieves Oliver had mentioned. The leader, a Siamese cat with piercing blue eyes, spoke in a low voice. "Remember, guys, Old Rat Beauregard's antique shop is our main target tonight, but we have to be quick and quiet. That guard dog has sharp ears." Unknown to them, a young female rat named Marie, who worked at the cafe, was taking out the trash and overheard part of the conversation. Worried, she hesitated, wondering whether to alert the rat police or warn Mr. Beauregard directly. Meanwhile, Oliver was racing through the cobblestone streets, his mind working frantically. He knew he couldn't face the thieves alone, but he was determined to do something. Passing by Jackson Square, he spotted a group of birds preparing for a night performance. An idea began to form in his feline mind. If he could somehow use the birds' music to delay the thieves or draw attention to the shop. Back at the antique shop, Mr. Beauregard was restless. He sniffed the air nervously, sensing that something was off, but he didn't know exactly what. Looking out the window, he noticed Max's absence from his usual post. "Strange," he squeaked to himself. "Max never leaves his post." The old rat shopkeeper's concern grew. He started checking the locks and traps, feeling that the night could bring more than just the December chill. In the meantime, Max had made his decision. With one last look at the shop, he sprinted in the direction Oliver had gone. His heart pounded not only from the physical effort, but from the magnitude of his choice. For the first time in his life, he was acting on his own, guided not just by duty, but by trust in a friend. The streets of New Orleans seemed like a labyrinth that night. Max used his keen sense of smell to try to locate Oliver, but the city's aromas, food, spices, the Mississippi River, made the task challenging. As he ran, Max reflected on his friendship with Oliver. How had a simple street cat managed to change his perspective so much in such a short time? The answer, he realized, lay in Oliver's genuine kindness and perseverance. Where Max saw differences and obstacles, Oliver saw possibilities and connections. Back at Jackson Square, Oliver had managed to catch the attention of the musician birds. With urgent meows and dramatic gestures, he tried to communicate the seriousness of the situation. The birds, initially confused, began to find humor in the little agitated cat. "Look," chirped one of the canaries, "it seems we have a new maestro." But when Oliver started gently tugging at one of the bird's feathers, trying to direct them toward the antique shop, something in the cat's behavior intrigued them. Deciding to follow this strange feline intuition, the group began to move, singing as they flew. The jazz melody began to echo through the streets, drawing the attention of nocturnal animals and inadvertently complicating the thieves' plans. The leader of the thief cats cursed quietly upon hearing the approaching music. "What the heck is that? We need to act fast before the streets get too busy." Meanwhile, Marie, the little rat, had decided to take action. She hurried toward the antique shop, determined to alert Mr. Beauregard. The various lines of action converged on the shop, the thief cats sneaking closer, Oliver leading the flock of musician birds, Max running desperately to find his friend, and Marie trying to warn the owner. The night in New Orleans, usually filled with music and celebration, now pulsed with rising tension. The fate of the antique shop, and more importantly, the friendship between an unlikely pair of friends, hung by a thread. The night in New Orleans was about to witness a decisive moment. The streets, normally alive with sound and activity, now seemed to hold their breath, awaiting the unfolding events. Max raced through the cobblestone streets, his heart pounding in his chest. He followed the scent of Oliver, mixed with the familiar aromas of the city. As he ran, his mind was conflicted. He had left his post, something he had never done before. Was he doing the right thing? Not far from there, Oliver led a peculiar group of musician birds. The little street cat meowed instructions, guiding the birds toward the antique shop. The jazz melody they created echoed through the streets, capturing the attention of all the animals nearby. The thief cats, led by the cunning Siamese, slinked through the shadows. They approached the shop, their sharp claws ready for action. However, the leader was growing increasingly nervous about the music drawing near. "This wasn't part of the plan," he hissed to his companions. "We need to be quick." Inside the shop, Mr. Beauregard, the old mouse shopkeeper, was on high alert. His whiskers trembled with anxiety as he peered out the window, searching for Max. Just then, he heard a frantic knock at the back door. It was Marie, the young cafe mouse. "Mr. Beauregard," she squeaked, breathless. "The thieving cats are coming. I overheard them planning the robbery." Mr. Beauregard froze for a moment, but soon his mind began racing. He needed to protect his shop, but how? Where was Max? At that moment, different lines of action converged in front of the antique store. Max arrived first, panting and determined. His eyes scanned the area, looking for Oliver. "Oliver!" he barked. "Where are you?" As if in response, the jazz melody grew louder, and Oliver appeared, leading his group of musician birds. The cat's eyes sparkled when he saw Max. "You came!" Oliver meowed, his voice filled with relief and joy. But there was no time for more words. At that instant, the thieving cats emerged from the shadows, their claws glinting under the Christmas lights. The Siamese leader stepped forward, his blue eyes fixed on Max. "Well, well," he purred dangerously. "The guard dog left his post. This makes our job much easier." Max positioned himself firmly between the thieves and the shop, his teeth bared in a low growl. "You won't get past me," he declared. Seeing the danger, Oliver quickly stepped beside Max. "And you won't get past me either," he meowed, his voice small but firm. The birds, realizing the gravity of the situation, began to sing louder, their music echoing through the streets. The sound attracted the attention of other animals nearby, who began to gather, curious to see what was happening. The leader of the thieves, quickly realizing he was surrounded, hissed in frustration. "This isn't over," he threatened, retreating with his companions. At that moment, Mr. Beauregard emerged from the shop, accompanied by Marie. His eyes widened at the scene before him. Max and Oliver standing together, facing the retreating thieves, surrounded by a growing crowd of curious animals and an improvised chorus of birds. "Max?" the old mouse called out, confused. "What's happening here?" Max turned to his owner, guilt evident in his eyes. "Mr. Beauregard, But before he could continue, Oliver stepped forward. "It was all my fault, Mr. Beauregard," the cat meowed. "I heard the thieves planning to rob your shop and came to warn Max. He left his post to help protect the store." Mr. Beauregard looked from Oliver to Max, understanding slowly dawning in his eyes. You worked together to save my shop?" Max nodded, his tail wagging hesitantly. "Yes, sir. I know I shouldn't have left my post, but nothing!" Mr. Beauregard interrupted, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my shop. And more than that, you showed that true protection comes from friendship and cooperation, not just standing still." The crowd of animals erupted in applause and cheerful noises. The birds began a new melody, this time a song of celebration. Max looked at Oliver, his eyes shining with newfound understanding. "Thank you, my friend," he softly barked. "You taught me the true meaning of protection." Oliver purred in response, nuzzling affectionately against Max. "And you taught me the true meaning of home," he meowed. As Christmas night unfolded in New Orleans, an unlikely friendship had not only saved a shop, but also transformed hearts and minds, proving that the true holiday spirit can be found in the most unexpected places. In the days that followed the incident at the antique shop, news spread quickly throughout New Orleans. The story of the guard dog and the street cat who thwarted a robbery together became the main topic in every corner of the city, from the birds' nests in the trees to the rat tunnels beneath the streets. For Max and Oliver, life changed dramatically. Mr. Beauregard, deeply grateful and touched by the courage of the two, made significant changes to the shop. He installed a small cat door next to the main entrance, allowing Oliver to come and go freely. Additionally, he prepared a cozy bed for the street cat right next to Max's basket. "You two proved that you're an unbeatable team," the old mouse said with a warm smile. "This shop is now your home." Oliver, for the first time in his life, experienced the feeling of having a true home. He quickly adapted to the new routine, helping Max with his guarding duties. His agility and street smarts perfectly complemented Max's strength and loyalty. Max, in turn, discovered a new dimension in his work and life. Oliver's presence not only alleviated the loneliness he had never admitted to feeling, but also made him see the world in a different light. He learned to be more flexible, to trust his instincts, and above all, to value friendship over blind duty. The local animal community was also deeply affected by the event. The birds that had helped that night began to hold regular serenades in front of the shop, attracting more customers and creating a joyful and welcoming atmosphere. Marie, the young cafe mouse, became a frequent visitor, bringing treats and news. Even the thieving cats felt the impact of the change. The Siamese leader, impressed by Oliver's courage and cleverness, began to rethink his lifestyle. He and his accomplices were increasingly seen helping needy animals instead of causing trouble. One afternoon, about a week after the incident, the Siamese leader appeared in front of the store. Max immediately went on alert, but Oliver calmed him with a gentle touch of his paw. "I came to apologize," the Siamese meowed, his head lowered in a sign of remorse. "What you did made me realize there are better ways to live. We're trying to change." Max and Oliver exchanged glances, and then Max spoke. "Everyone deserves a second chance, especially at Christmas. Maybe you can use your skills to help protect the stores instead of stealing from them." The Siamese's face lit up at the suggestion. That would be wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity." This spirit of forgiveness and redemption spread throughout the city like a warm wave. Animals that once barely tolerated each other began to greet one another in the streets. Invisible boundaries between territories of different species began to dissolve. Mr. Beauregard, watching all these changes from his window, smiled with satisfaction. "Look at that," he said to Max and Oliver one night. "You didn't just save my store, you brought the true spirit of Christmas to the entire city." Oliver purred contentedly, snuggling closer to Max. "I think we've learned that home isn't a place," he gently meowed. "It's where we find friendship and acceptance." Max nodded, his tail gently thumping against the floor. "And that true strength comes not from being alone, but from trusting and working together." As the Christmas lights twinkled outside and the distant sound of jazz music floated in the air, Max and Oliver shared a deep understanding. They had found not just each other, but also a new way of seeing the world. A world where differences were celebrated and where friendship could overcome any obstacle. With the arrival of the new year, Max and Oliver faced new challenges that tested their friendship and forced them to grow both individually and as a duo. One cold January morning, a new neighbor arrived on the street, an imposing peregrine falcon named Sky. His presence caused agitation among the smaller animals in the neighborhood, including Oliver. The cat, still carrying emotional scars from his life on the streets, felt his old fear resurfacing. Max noticed his friend's unease. "What's wrong, Oliver?" he asked, concerned. Oliver hesitated before responding. "That falcon, he reminds me of the dangers I faced on the streets. What if he decides I'm an easy prey?" Determined to help his friend, Max decided it was time for Oliver to confront his fears. "Let's talk to Sky," he suggested. "Maybe we can make a new friend." Reluctant but trusting Max, Oliver agreed. Together, they approached the falcon, who was watching them with sharp eyes from the top of a post. "Hello, Sky," Max barked amiably. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Max, and this is my friend Oliver." Sky tilted his head, curious. "A dog and a cat, friends? That's unusual." Oliver, gathering his courage, stepped forward. "Just like a falcon talking to a cat instead of hunting it," he meowed, his voice trembling slightly. Sky let out a sound that resembled laughter. "Touché, little one. Don't worry, I'm not here to hunt. In fact, I'm on a mission of peace." Intrigued, Max and Oliver listened as Sky explained that he was a messenger, bringing news from other cities. He spoke of a growing movement of friendship and cooperation among different species, inspired by the story of Max and Oliver. "You two have become a symbol of hope," Sky declared. "Animals everywhere are learning to overcome their differences and work together." This revelation gave Max and Oliver a new perspective. They hadn't just changed their own lives and their local community, they were influencing animals in distant places. Motivated by this discovery, Max and Oliver decided to do more. With Sky's help, they began organizing regular gatherings in the plaza in front of the antique shop. Animals of all species were invited to share stories, resolve conflicts, and learn from each other. However, not everything was easy. Old prejudices and fears still existed. During one of these gatherings, a group of rats expressed their fear of cats, while some birds still felt nervous around Sky. Remembering his own initial fear, Oliver took the initiative. "I've been afraid too," he admitted to the group. "But I've learned that when we give ourselves the chance to get to know someone, we often find a friend where we once saw a threat." Max supported his friend. "Change is hard," he gently barked. "But together, we can overcome our fears and create something better." Over the following weeks, Max and Oliver worked tirelessly to build bridges between the different species. They organized friendship patrols throughout the city, where animals of different species walked together, learning about each other's perspectives. Oliver, in particular, grew immensely during this time. He was no longer the scared, solitary street cat. Now he moved with confidence, his voice firm as he mediated conflicts and offered advice. Max also evolved. His sense of duty, once rigid and inflexible, became more encompassing. He understood that protecting meant more than just guarding a store. It was about building a strong, united community. One day, while watching the sunset from the shop's balcony, Oliver turned to Max. "Do you remember when we first met?" he asked, his eyes shining with the memory. Max smiled. "How could I forget? You were just a stubborn cat who wouldn't give up," Oliver laughed. "And you were a grumpy dog who didn't know what he was missing." His tone turned more serious. "Look at us now, Max. Look at what we've built together." Max nodded, his expression filled with pride and affection. "We've built a family, Oliver. Not just the two of us, but this whole community." As the stars began to twinkle in the New Orleans sky, Max and Oliver stood side by side, living symbols of how friendship can transform not just individuals, but entire communities. They had grown, overcome their fears, and in the process, inspired others to do the same. With the arrival of summer, New Orleans was gearing up for its famous jazz festival. The city was buzzing, with animals of all kinds working together to prepare. Max and Oliver, now respected figures in the community, were at the center of it all. One morning, while overseeing the decoration of the main square, Sky landed beside them, his feathers ruffled and breathless. "Max, Oliver," he said urgently, "I have troubling news. A group of animals from outside the city is planning to sabotage the festival. They don't like the new harmony among the species and want to cause chaos to prove that different animals cannot coexist peacefully." Max and Oliver exchanged worried glances. Everything they had worked for was under threat. "Who are they?" Max asked, his protective instincts flaring. "A mixed gang," Sky replied. "Wolves, foxes, even some feral cats. They call themselves the Separatists." Oliver shuddered at the mention of the feral cats, recalling unpleasant encounters from the past. But he forced himself to stay calm. "What can we do?" "We need to unite the whole community," Max said, determination in his voice. "This is the time to show that our strength lies in our unity." In the following days, Max and Oliver worked tirelessly. They called emergency meetings, organized watch groups, and created contingency plans. Each species had a role to play. The birds would form an aerial surveillance network, the rats would use their tunnel network for quick communication, and the dogs and cats would form rapid response teams. Mr. Beauregard, watching everything from his window, couldn't help but feel proud. "You two have grown so much," he said to Max and Oliver one night. "Do you remember how you were when you first met?" Oliver smiled, reminiscing. We were so different and so stubborn. And now look at you, the old rat continued, leading an entire city. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Max nodded solemnly. We won't let you down, Mr. Beauregard, or the city. As the festival approached, tension in the city mounted. Everyone was on alert, waiting for the separatists to make their move. Max and Oliver barely slept, patrolling the streets day and night. On the eve of the festival, while doing their nightly rounds, Oliver suddenly stopped, his ears twitching. Max, he whispered, did you hear that? Max perked up his ears. In the silence of the night, he could hear whispers coming from a nearby alley. Cautiously, they approached. Hidden in the shadows, they saw a group of animals they had never seen before. A large grey wolf seemed to be giving instructions. Tomorrow, when the festival starts, the wolf growled quietly, each of you knows what to do. Let's show these fools that different species cannot live in harmony. Max and Oliver exchanged alarmed glances. The danger was real and imminent. We need to go back and warn the others, Max whispered. But before they could move, a twig snapped under Oliver's paw. The sound, though small, was enough to alert the group of separatists. Intruders, the wolf shouted. Get them! In an instant, Max and Oliver found themselves racing through the streets of New Orleans, with the separatists hot on their heels. The chase was frantic, leading them through narrow alleys and over the rooftops of old buildings. As they ran, Max and Oliver knew they weren't just fleeing for their lives. The fate of the entire festival, and perhaps the harmony they had worked so hard to build, depended on them reaching the city in time to warn everyone. With the separatists closing in and dawn of the festival day approaching rapidly, Max and Oliver were facing the greatest challenge of their lives. The city they loved, and everything they had achieved together, was at stake. The sun began to rise on the horizon of New Orleans, when Max and Oliver, panting and exhausted, finally managed to shake off the separatists. They had led their pursuers through a maze of alleys and side streets, using their intimate knowledge of the city to gain an advantage. We need to warn the others, Oliver gasped, his normally well-groomed fur now tangled and dirty. Max nodded, also breathing heavily. Let's head to the central square. The festival is about to start, and everyone will be there. Running as fast as their weary paws would allow, they arrived at the main square just as the first rays of sunlight touched the colorful decorations. The square was already filled with animals of all species, all excited for the festival to begin. Attention! Max barked as loudly as he could. Everyone, please listen! The animals turned, surprised to see Max and Oliver in such a state. The separatists are here. Oliver mewed, his voice filled with urgency. They plan to sabotage the festival. A murmur of fear and confusion spread through the crowd. Mr. Beauregard quickly approached, his whiskers trembling with concern. What can we do? He asked. Before Max or Oliver could respond, a roar echoed through the square. The leader of the separatists, the large grey wolf, emerged from the shadows, followed by his gang. It's too late, he growled. This farce of harmony among species ends now. Chaos erupted in the square. Animals were running in all directions, parents trying to protect their young, and the sounds of growls and screams filled the air. Max stood firmly, with Oliver by his side. We're not going to let you destroy everything we've built, Max barked defiantly. The wolf laughed, a cold and cruel sound. And what can the two of you do against all of us? It was at that moment that something incredible happened. One by one, the animals of the city began to line up behind Max and Oliver. Rats, birds, cats, dogs, even the old thieving cats led by the Siamese, all united. They are not alone, declared Sky, majestically landing beside Max and Oliver. We are all in this together. The leader of the separatists hesitated, clearly not expecting such a show of unity. Oliver stepped forward, his voice firm despite the fear he still felt. You don't understand? This is true strength. It's not about one species dominating another, but about all of us working together. Look around you, Max continued. See what we can achieve when we overcome our differences. This city, this festival, is proof of that. The separatists began to exchange uncertain glances. Some seemed to be reconsidering their actions. At that moment, the city's jazz band, made up of a diverse mix of animals, began to play a soft and engaging melody. The music flowed through the square, touching the hearts of everyone present. "This is the music of New Orleans," Oliver said, his voice rising above the melody, a harmony created by many different voices, each unique, but all working together to create something beautiful. The leader of the separatists looked around, seeing his followers lower their guards, some even swaying gently to the rhythm of the music. "Maybe," he said slowly, "maybe we have been mistaken." Max cautiously approached the wolf. "It's not too late to change. You can join us. Be part of this harmony." There was a moment of tension as everyone awaited the wolf's response. Then, slowly, he lowered his head in a gesture of surrender and respect. "We would like to try," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. A roar of joy erupted across the square. Animals of all species began to mingle, the previous tension dissolving into a celebration of unity and understanding. Max and Oliver exchanged a look of deep satisfaction and relief. They had faced their greatest challenge, and with the help of the entire community, they had prevailed. Mr. Beauregard approached them, tears of pride in his eyes. "You too," he said, his voice choked. "You truly brought the spirit of New Orleans to all of us. The idea that, no matter how different we are, we can create something beautiful together." As the jazz festival officially began, with the music now including some of the new community members, Max and Oliver sat side by side, exhausted but happy. "You know," said Oliver, leaning against his friend, "I think I finally understand the true meaning of home." Max smiled, his tail gently thumping on the ground. "And what is it?" Oliver looked around at the scene of harmony and celebration surrounding them. "It's this. It's being where you belong, surrounded by those you love and who love you back, no matter how different you may be." Max nodded, feeling the deep truth in his friend's words. Together, they had not only found a home, but had helped create one for an entire city. In the weeks that followed the jazz festival, New Orleans experienced a remarkable transformation. The story of how Max and Oliver, along with the entire animal community, had united the city and avoided conflict spread quickly, inspiring change beyond the city limits. The former leader of the separatists, the Grey Wolf, who now went by the name Grizz, became an active member of the community. He used his strength and leadership to help with construction and maintenance projects around the city, working side by side with animals he once would have considered enemies. The old thieving cats, led by the Siamese, formed a community safety team, using their skills to protect rather than steal. They worked closely with Max, learning the true meaning of guarding and caring. Oliver, for his part, became a sort of city ambassador. His ability to connect with different types of animals and his story of overcoming challenges made him the perfect spokesperson for New Orleans' message of unity. He traveled to other cities, always returning with stories of how harmony was spreading. Mr. Beauregard expanded his antique shop, transforming it into a community center where animals of all species could gather, share stories, and resolve conflicts peacefully. The shop became a living symbol of the New Orleans. Sky, the peregrine falcon, established a communication network between cities, allowing the message of unity and cooperation to spread even further. Birds of all kinds joined him in this mission. On a quiet afternoon, Max and Oliver were sitting on the porch of the shop, watching the city they had helped transform. The streets were filled with life, with animals of all species living harmoniously together. "Did you ever imagine we would get this far?" Oliver asked, his voice full of admiration. Max shook his head, smiling. "Not in my wildest dreams. But look at us now, at our city, our family. Oliver gently corrected. Max nodded, emotional. Yes, our family. At that moment they saw a group of puppies, kittens, puppies, and even a little wolf playing together in the square. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable just a few months before. You know, Max, Oliver said, his eyes shining, I think we've discovered something important here. What is it? Max asked, curious. That love, friendship, and understanding are the most powerful forces that exist. They can overcome any barrier, any difference. Max nodded, feeling the weight and truth of those words, and that we all have the capacity to change, to grow, to become something better than we were. As the sun set over New Orleans, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Max and Oliver stood side by side, living symbols of a friendship that had transformed not only their lives but the entire city. They had proven that with courage, compassion, and an open heart, anyone can find a home and a family, no matter how different they may seem at first glance. But the night is far from over, for now we begin a new tale, the ant and the great act. In the vast and majestic forest of Maine, where centuries-old pines reached toward the sky and crystal-clear streams meandered between mossy rocks, lived a small ant named Anna. Her tiny size stood in stark contrast to her enormous determination, a trait that set her apart from the thousands of other ants in her colony. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves began to carpet the forest floor, Anna set out in search of food for her colony. The fresh air carried the aroma of pine trees and damp earth as she skillfully navigated among fallen leaves and twisted branches. Not far away, perched on a tall blade of grass, was Gus, a grasshopper with keen eyes and a skeptical attitude. He watched the relentless hustle and bustle of the ants with a mix of boredom and curiosity. Why all the effort for crumbs? He murmured to himself, shaking his head in disapproval. Anna, ignoring the grasshopper's presence, continued her tireless search. Her attentive eyes scanned the ground for anything that could be useful to her colony. Then she spotted something extraordinary, a golden seed shining under a beam of sunlight that pierced through the dense canopy of trees. The ant approached, her eyes wide with amazement. The seed was enormous, larger than anything she had ever tried to carry before. For a moment, Anna hesitated, aware of her own insignificance in the face of such a colossal treasure. Gus, noticing the unusual pause in the small ant's movement, leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What does this little ant think she's going to do?" he murmured, a smirk forming on his face. Anna took a deep breath, filling herself with courage. With renewed determination, she positioned herself behind the seed and began to push. Her tiny muscles trembled with the effort, but the seed didn't budge an inch. Gus couldn't help but laugh. "Give up, little ant," he shouted. "That seed is too big for you. Why waste energy on something impossible?" Anna paused for a moment, looking at the grasshopper. Instead of despair, there was a spark of challenge in her eyes. "No effort is wasted when you have a purpose," she replied, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. Intrigued by her response, Gus decided to watch more closely. He hopped down from his perch and approached the scene, his eyes fixed on the little ant, who was now resuming her seemingly impossible task. Anna continued to push, each tiny movement a testament to her unwavering persistence. The seed still didn't move, but something began to change around her. Other ants, drawn by Anna's determination, started to gather. One by one, they joined in her effort. At first, there were only 2 or 3, but soon they became dozens. The collective energy was palpable, resonating through the forest floor. Gus watched in awe as the number of ants continued to grow. What had once seemed an impossible task for a single ant was now transformed into a coordinated effort of the entire colony. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the seed began to move. It was just a slight tremor initially, But as more ants joined in, the movement became more pronounced. Anna, at the center of the group, continued to push with all her might, inspiring her companions with her tireless perseverance. Her tiny feet planted firmly on the ground, each push a declaration that no obstacle was too great when faced with unity and determination. Gus, completely absorbed by the spectacle, found himself silently cheering for the ants. His initial skepticism gave way to a growing admiration for the courage and teamwork he was witnessing. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the golden seed finally rolled into the entrance of the anthill. A chorus of joy erupted among the ants, their celebration a symphony of collective triumph. Anna, exhausted yet radiant, looked up at Gus. The grasshopper, still stunned by what he had just witnessed, met her gaze. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, a lesson about the power of perseverance and unity that no words could adequately express. As the ants disappeared into their nest with their precious prize, Gus remained there, contemplative. The forest around him seemed different now, as if the act of courage he had just witnessed had changed the very essence of the world around him. The grasshopper hopped back to his blade of grass, but his eyes remained fixed on the entrance of the anthill. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, not just the moving of a seed, but the transformation of an impossibility into reality through the strength of determination and collaboration. As night fell over the forest of Maine, Gus found himself reflecting on his own life, questioning how many times he had given up on challenges for seeming too great. The following days brought a subtle yet noticeable change to the forest of Maine. Anna and her colony's heroic feat had spread, whispered by the wind among the leaves of oaks and pines. Anna, now regarded with newfound respect by her peers, continued her daily routine with the same humility as always. Her antennas constantly moved, picking up the damp scents of moss and the sweet aroma of wildflowers that dotted the clearing near the anthill. Born during a particularly dry summer, Anna had always had to fight harder than her sisters to survive. This initial adversity shaped her determination, transforming her into the resilient ant that now inspired the entire colony. Her body, though small even by ant standards, bore almost imperceptible scars from past battles against predators and harsh conditions. Meanwhile, Gus the grasshopper found himself in a state of restlessness he had never experienced before. Accustomed to spending his days hopping carefreely from leaf to leaf, he now found himself closely observing the tireless work of the ants. Gus had grown up in a family of grasshoppers, known for their carefree attitude toward life. "Why worry?" his father used to say. "Summer always comes back." But now Anna's words echoed in his mind, challenging everything he thought he knew about the world. One day, while Anna led an expedition to collect fallen leaves for the anthill, Gus finally gathered the courage to approach the small ant. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice betraying a mix of curiosity and admiration. Anna paused for a moment, her antennae moving gently as she considered the question. "Do what?" she replied, genuinely intrigued. "Keep trying even when it seems impossible," Gus elaborated, recalling the ant's unwavering determination in the face of the enormous golden seed. Anna smiled, a gesture almost imperceptible to the grasshopper. "Every little effort counts," she explained. "Even when we can't see the immediate result, every step brings us closer to where we want to go." Gus pondered these words, his large eyes narrowing in concentration. The simplicity of Anna's answer contrasted sharply with the depth of its meaning. As they spoke, the world around them came to life. A curious squirrel watched the unusual scene from atop a pine branch, its bushy tail swaying gently. Monarch butterflies, in their annual migration, gracefully hovered over wildflowers, their orange wings shining under the midday sun. The Maine forest, with its rich tapestry of life, served as a constant reminder of the interconnectedness of all creatures. The towering pines with their deep ancient roots provided shelter and sustenance for countless species. The crystal-clear streams flowing over smooth stones and soft moss brought life and renewal to every corner of the forest. Anna, in her simple wisdom, intuitively understood this connection. Every leaf she carried, every grain of sand she moved, contributed to something greater than herself, the well-being of the entire colony and, by extension, the balance of the forest itself. Gus, on the other hand, was just beginning to glimpse this complex web of relationships. His questions for Anna grew deeper, revealing a curiosity he never knew he had. As the day went on, Anna and Gus continued their conversation, interspersing it with the tasks Anna needed to complete. The grasshopper watched, renewed fascination evident, as the ant skillfully navigated the forest terrain, her determination clear in every precise movement. The sunlight, filtered through the leaves above, created a dancing pattern of shadows and light on the forest floor. This interplay of light seemed to reflect the transformation occurring within Gus, areas of doubt and skepticism gradually illuminated by a new understanding. As the sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Anna prepared to return to the anthill. Gus, reluctant to end the conversation, found himself eager for more knowledge, more understanding, more purpose. Can I observe your work up close tomorrow?" he asked hesitantly, his voice carrying a vulnerability he had never shown before. Anna nodded, a spark of approval in her compound eyes. "Of course," she replied. "There's always room for those who want to learn and contribute." With those words, Anna disappeared into the entrance of the anthill, leaving Gus with much to ponder. The grasshopper jumped onto a nearby blade of grass, his gaze fixed on the fiery horizon. The forest around him seemed different now, not just a backdrop for his carefree existence, but a world full of possibilities and responsibilities. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Gus found himself looking forward to dawn, for the first time in his life eagerly anticipating what the new day might bring. Dawn brought with it an unexpected change in the main forest. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, laden with rain and promises of a storm. The air was heavy, thick with humidity and anticipation. Anna emerged from the anthill, her antennae moving quickly, sensing the subtle changes in the atmosphere. She knew a storm was approaching, and with it, new challenges for the colony. Gus, true to his word, was waiting nearby. He observed Anna with renewed curiosity, noting the tension in her posture. "What's wrong?" he asked, jumping closer. "A storm is coming," Anna replied, her eyes scanning the darkened sky. "We need to prepare." As she spoke, other ants began to emerge from the anthill, each ready to play their part in the preparations. Anna started giving quick, precise instructions, coordinating the efforts of the colony. Gus watched, fascinated by the efficiency and organization of the ants. He had never considered what a storm could mean for such small creatures. Suddenly, a thought struck him. "What about the golden seed?" he asked, remembering the precious item for which Anna and her companions had worked so hard. Anna paused, her gaze shifting toward the entrance of the anthill. "It's stored in a deep chamber," she explained, "but if the rain is too heavy—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Gus understood the danger implied in her words. The seed, so hard won, could be lost if the anthill flooded. At that moment, the first raindrops began to fall, large and heavy. The ants intensified their efforts, scrambling to strengthen the entrances of the anthill and create barriers against the accumulating water. Gus felt a wave of helplessness. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. His legs, so useful for jumping, felt inadequate for the delicate tasks the ants were performing. "What can I do?" he asked Anna, his voice betraying his anxiety. Anna looked at the grasshopper, surprised by his offer to help. She thought for a moment, then her eyes lit up with an idea. "Your legs," she said. "You can jump. You can help us reach high places to build barriers." Gus nodded, excited by the opportunity to be useful. He began working alongside the ants, using his powerful hind legs to leap and position leaves and twigs in strategic locations around the anthill. As the rain intensified, turning into a full-blown deluge, the task became increasingly difficult. The ants struggled against the current that was beginning to form in the forest floor, their tiny bodies nearly submerged by the water. Anna tirelessly led the effort, alternating between giving instructions and working side by side with her companions. Her example inspired the other ants to keep going, even as fatigue began to set in. Gus, in turn, discovered a new facet of himself. Each jump, each leaf positioned, each barrier erected made him feel part of something larger. He was no longer just an observer, but an active participant in the fight for survival. As the hours passed, the storm reached its peak. The wind howled through the trees, tearing leaves and small branches away. The rain fell in dense curtains, obscuring vision and making every movement a struggle. It was at this critical moment that Anna made an alarming discovery. One of the secondary entrances to the anthill, hidden beneath the roots of a nearby tree, was beginning to give way under the pressure of the water. "If that entrance collapses," she shouted over the roar of the storm, "the seed chamber will be flooded." Hearing Anna's shout, Gus jumped to the location. He saw the danger immediately. The water was rapidly eroding the soil around the entrance, threatening to collapse it at any moment. Without thinking twice, the grasshopper positioned himself at the opening, using his body as a living barrier against the rush of water. The cold water hit him hard, nearly knocking him over, but he held his ground. "Quick!" he shouted to Anna. "Bring something to reinforce the entrance." Anna quickly mobilized a group of ants. They worked feverishly, carrying pieces of bark, leaves, and even small stones to shore up the threatened entrance. Gus remained in position, his body trembling with the effort to resist the force of the water. He could feel the current trying to drag him away, but every time he thought about giving up, he remembered Anna's determination in the face of the golden seed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the entrance was reinforced enough to withstand the water. Gus, exhausted and soaked, staggered away, immediately surrounded by grateful ants. Anna approached him, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and admiration. "You saved our colony," she said simply. "And the seed." Gus, still panting, felt a wave of pride and fulfillment like he had never experienced before. He had made a difference. He had been part of something greater than himself. As the storm began to subside, Gus looked around at the exhausted but triumphant ants at the ant hill they had protected together. He then understood that he had found something he never knew he was searching for: a purpose. In the days following the storm, the main forest slowly began to recover. The sun returned, drying up the puddles and revitalizing the vegetation. For the colony of ants and their new ally, Gus, this period brought not only relief, but also new challenges and discoveries. Inna, always attentive to the needs of the colony, noticed that the damage caused by the storm went beyond what they had initially observed. Some of the deeper chambers of the anthill had been affected by moisture, threatening the food reserves stored for the winter. As she led the recovery efforts, Anna noticed something unusual. Some of the younger ants appeared reluctant to venture outside the anthill, still traumatized by the storm experience. This hesitation threatened to delay the necessary repairs and the replenishment of food reserves. Gus, now a constant presence around the anthill, observed Anna's concern. "What's the problem?" he asked, jumping closer to her. Anna explained the situation, her antennae moving nervously. "We need all the ants working if we want to be ready for winter," she concluded. Gus thought for a moment, then had an idea. "What if I could help train the young ants?" he suggested. "I can teach them how to identify signs of danger and how to react quickly." Anna considered the proposal, initially skeptical. After all, Gus was a grasshopper, not an ant. but she remembered his courage during the storm and decided to trust him. Thus began a curious partnership. Gus, with his unique perspective and different skills, started working with the younger ants. He taught her to use her antennas to detect subtle changes in the air, to recognize the sounds that preceded a storm, and to find quick escape routes in case of emergency. Meanwhile, Anna faced another challenge. The golden seed, although saved from the flood, had begun to germinate due to the moisture. She knew they needed to decide quickly whether to let the seed grow or to use it as food before it lost its nutritional value. This decision divided the colony. Some ants argued that the seed was too valuable as a food source to be wasted. Others saw the potential of a new plant as a future source of food and shelter. Anna found herself at the center of this debate, trying to balance the immediate needs of the colony with future possibilities. She turned to Gus, valuing his outside perspective. "What do you think?" she asked, her antennas moving anxiously. Gus pondered the question carefully. He had learned a lot about long-term planning from the ants, but he also understood the importance of adaptability that his own species valued. "Maybe," he began slowly, "we can do both. Use part of the seed for immediate food and allow the rest to grow. This way, we're preparing for the present and the future." Gus's suggestion sparked murmurs of approval among the ants. It was a solution no one had considered before, one that combined the ants' prudence with the flexibility of the grasshoppers. As the colony implemented this plan, something remarkable began to happen. The younger ants, inspired by Gus's teachings, started to show more confidence. They not only ventured out of the anthill to work, but also brought new and creative ideas to improve the colony's operations. Anna watched these changes with a mix of pride and admiration. Gus's presence had brought a new dynamic to the colony, challenging old assumptions and stimulating growth in unexpected ways. As autumn approached, heralding the onset of winter, the colony found itself not only recovered from the storm, but stronger and more resilient than ever. The unlikely partnership between Anna and Gus had created a community that was both structured and adaptable, capable of facing challenges with creativity and determination. And in the heart of the anthill, protected and nurtured, the golden seed began to sprout, a living symbol of hope and possibilities that arise when different perspectives unite in a common purpose. Autumn advanced quickly in the main forest, painting the trees with vibrant shades of red, orange, and gold. The ant colony, under Anna's leadership and with Gus's help, was well prepared for the approaching winter. The harmony between the ants and the grasshopper seemed unshakable until an unexpected event shook the community's structure. One cold, cloudy morning, Anna emerged from the anthill to find Gus in an unusual state of agitation. His large eyes were wide, and his antennas trembled visibly. "Anna!" he called, his voice laden with urgency. "Something is happening, I can feel it." Before Anna could inquire further, a tremor ran through the forest floor. The leaves on the trees quivered, and small stones rolled across the ground. It was an earthquake, a rare phenomenon in that region. Panic spread quickly among the ants. Despite all the training and preparation, nothing had prepared them for the ground literally moving beneath their feet. The ants ran in all directions, some trying to return to the anthill, others simply fleeing for safety. Anna tried to maintain calm, shouting instructions to her companions, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Gus, for his part, was leaping frantically, trying to gather the scattered ants. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed through the forest. An ancient tree, its roots weakened by the earthquake, began to fall. Its growing shadow covered the anthill, threatening to crush everything the ants had built. At that critical moment, something extraordinary happened. Gus, seeing the imminent danger, made an instant decision. With a powerful leap, he launched himself toward the trunk of the falling tree. In midair, his body began to glow with a strange and intense light. Anna and the other ants watched, stunned, as Gus seemed to grow and transform. When he struck the tree, he was no longer a small grasshopper, but a magnificent creature with shining wings and a body strong enough to divert the tree's fall. With Herculean effort, Gus pushed the trunk, altering its trajectory. The tree fell with a thunderous crash, but miraculously beside the anthill, sparing it from destruction. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of leaves falling and small stones settling. The ants slowly emerged from their hiding places, staring in astonishment at the scene before them. Gus landed softly beside Anna, his body still glowing faintly. He looked as surprised as everyone else by his transformation. "What? What just happened?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gus glanced at his new wings, still incredulous. I don't know," he replied. "I just knew I had to do something, that I couldn't let you all be crushed." At that moment, an ethereal and ancient voice echoed through the clearing. "Gus, the guardian of the forest," the voice announced. "You have proven your worth through your courage and compassion. All the creatures of the forest, from the smallest ants to the largest deer, stopped to listen as the voice continued. For a long time, this forest has awaited a true guardian, someone capable of uniting all creatures in harmony. Your journey of learning with the ants, your willingness to change and grow, and your final act of self-sacrifice proved that you are worthy of this role." Gus, still dazed, looked at Anna. The small ant stared back with a mix of admiration and sadness. They both understood that this was a turning point, not just for Gus, but for the entire forest. "But what about the colony?" Gus asked, his voice trembling slightly. The voice responded gently, "As guardian, you won't be abandoning anyone. On the contrary, your duty will be to protect and guide all the creatures of the forest, including your ant friends." Anna stepped forward, her antennae moving with determination. "Gus," she said, her voice firm despite her emotions, "you taught us so much. You showed us that there's more to life than just working and surviving. Now it's your chance to do that for the whole forest." Gus looked around at the ants he had come to consider family, at the forest that was now his responsibility to protect. He realized that this was the greater purpose he had always sought, even without knowing it. With a solemn nod, Gus accepted his new role. As he soared into the air, his shimmering wings reflecting the sunlight, Anna and the ants watched with a mix of pride and gratitude. The main forest had changed forever. The little grasshopper, who once questioned the value of effort, had now become its protector, a living symbol of the power of transformation and the importance of every small act of courage. In the days that followed Gus's transformation, the main forest entered a period of adaptation and change. News of the new guardian spread quickly, bringing both hope and apprehension to the various inhabitants of the forest. For the ant colony, Gus's elevation brought mixed feelings. On one hand, there was immense pride in knowing that their friend and mentor had become such an important figure. On the other, his absence left a palpable void in their daily routine. Anna, in particular, felt the weight of this change. She found herself frequently gazing at the sky, hoping to catch a glimpse of Gus's shining wings. Despite her longing, she knew she had to be strong and lead her colony through this transition. One morning, while supervising the food collection, Anna noticed something unusual. The younger ants, those Gus had trained, were implementing techniques she had never seen before. They were using leaves as tiny rafts to transport seeds across puddles, an innovation that significantly increased their efficiency. "Where did you learn that?" Anna asked, curious. One of the young ants replied, her antennae moving with excitement, "We wondered what Gus would do. He always encouraged us to think differently." Anna felt a wave of pride and understanding. Gus's legacy extended beyond his physical presence. He had planted seeds of creativity and adaptability that were now flourishing. Meanwhile, in other parts of the forest, Gus's presence as guardian began to be felt. Long-standing disputes between different species, which had previously seemed insoluble, were now finding peaceful resolutions under his mediation. His unique perspective, shaped by his experiences as a grasshopper and his time with the ants, allowed him to see solutions that others couldn't. One day, a group of squirrels approached Gus with a problem. They were worried about the dwindling supply of nuts for the winter. Instead of merely redistributing the existing resources, Gus proposed an innovative solution. He suggested a partnership between the squirrels and a group of migratory birds, where the birds would help plant new nut trees in unexplored areas of the forest, ensuring a sustainable food source for future generations. This collaborative approach began to spread throughout the forest. Different species, which had rarely interacted before, now worked together for the common good. The main forest was becoming a model of cooperation and sustainability. However, not all reactions to the new order were positive. Some animals, accustomed to the old ways of competition and territoriality, resisted the changes. A group of wolves, in particular, viewed the new era of cooperation as a threat to their dominance. Gus was aware of these challenges. He knew that changing the mindset of an entire forest would not be an easy or quick task. But he remembered the lessons of persistence he had learned from Anna and her fellow ants. Every small step, every act of kindness and understanding contributed to the larger change he hoped to achieve. One afternoon, while flying over the forest on one of his regular patrols, Gus spotted Anna's anthill. He landed gently nearby, his heart full of longing and gratitude. Anna, sensing his presence, emerged to greet him. For a moment they stood in silence, the small ant and the majestic guardian, united by a friendship that transcended their differences. "How are things going here?" Gus finally asked, his voice filled with emotion. Anna looked at her bustling colony. "Different," she replied honestly, "but we're growing, adapting. You taught us well." Gus smiled, feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia. "And you taught me more than I can express," he replied. "Every day I use the lessons I learned here to guide the whole forest." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Gus and Anna talked about the challenges and joys of their new roles. Although their paths had diverged, the bond between them remained strong, a testament to the enduring power of friendship and mutual learning. As autumn gave way to winter, new challenges arose in the main forest. The intense cold and snow blanketed the landscape, testing the resilience of all its inhabitants. For Gus, the guardian of the forest, this period represented his greatest test yet. On a particularly frigid morning, Gus was flying over the forest on his daily patrol when he noticed something alarming. The stream that served as the main source of water for many animals was beginning to freeze. If the situation persisted, many creatures would find themselves without access to drinking water. Gus landed near the stream, his mind racing to find a solution. He recalled how the ants had faced resource scarcity during the summer, working together to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Inspired by those memories, Gus called an emergency meeting with representatives from all species in the forest: beavers, deer, foxes, owls, and even the pack of wolves that had previously resisted his leadership responded to the call. "Friends," Gus began, his voice resonating with authority and compassion, "we are facing a challenge that threatens all of us. But I believe that together we can find a solution." Initially, there was skepticism. Many animals were used to taking care of themselves during the harsh winter. The idea of working collectively was new and daunting for some. Then a small voice spoke up. It was Anna, who had traveled a long distance to attend the meeting. "In our colony," she said, her voice firm despite her diminutive size, "we learned that no problem is too great when faced together." Anna's words had a profound impact. Gus felt a wave of gratitude and pride for his friend, seeing how the lessons they had shared continued to spread. Encouraged, the animals began to offer ideas. The beavers suggested building a series of small dams to create areas of flowing water that would resist freezing. The owls offered to patrol at night, alerting others to areas that were starting to freeze. The deer proposed using their hooves to break the thin ice, keeping openings to the water accessible. Even the wolves, initially reluctant, found an important role. Their strength and resistance to the cold made them ideal for transporting building materials for the beavers and for clearing paths through the snow for the smaller animals. Gus coordinated these efforts, flying from group to group, providing encouragement and assistance where needed. He found himself facing challenges he had never imagined, from mediating disputes between species to finding creative solutions to unexpected problems. There were moments of doubt and difficulty. One particularly cold night, when the biting wind threatened to topple the structures they had built, Gus felt the weight of his responsibility more than ever. He wondered if he was truly up to the task of being the guardian of the forest. It was in this moment of doubt that Gus saw something that filled him with renewed hope and determination. A group of young animals from different species, wolf pups, fawns, small squirrels, and even a few ants who had ventured out from their anthill, were working together to strengthen one of the dams. Witnessing this spontaneous collaboration, Gus understood that his true role as guardian was not to solve all the problems on his own, but to inspire and facilitate cooperation among all the forest inhabitants. With this new understanding, Gus redirected his efforts. He began organizing training sessions where different species could share their unique skills. The ants taught teamwork techniques, the beavers shared engineering knowledge, and the wolves offered lessons in leadership and strategy. As winter progressed, the main forest transformed. What had once been a collection of isolated groups struggling for survival became a united and resilient community. The stream continued to flow, providing water for all thanks to the combined efforts of its inhabitants. Gus, observing this transformation, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had grown so much since his days as a simple, questioning grasshopper. Now, as guardian, he was not only protecting the forest, but cultivating a new way of life based on cooperation and mutual respect. One afternoon, while flying over the snow-covered forest, Gus spotted Anna leading a group of ants on a winter food-collecting expedition. He landed softly beside her. "Hello, old friend," he said with a warm smile. Anna looked up, her eyes shining with recognition and affection. "Hello, Guardian," she replied, a hint of pride in her voice. Together they gazed at the forest around them, witnesses to the miracle of transformation they had helped create. The journey had been long and challenging, but the growth and resilience they had witnessed, both in themselves and throughout the forest, made every step worthwhile. As winter approached its end, a new threat loomed on the horizon of the main forest. Rumors of a severe ice storm began circulating among the animals. Gus, in his daily patrols, had noticed concerning signs: dark clouds gathering on the horizon, a biting wind coming from the north, and a sharp drop in temperature. Aware of the gravity of the situation, Gus called an emergency meeting with all the leaders of the different communities in the forest. At the great oak in the center of the forest, representatives from all species gathered. The wise old deer, the matriarch of the wolves, the leader of the beavers, the ancient owl, and of course, Anna, representing the ants. "Friends," Gus began, his deep voice echoing through the clearing, "we face an unprecedented challenge. The approaching storm threatens not only our individual survival, but the very structure of our community." A murmur of concern swept through the assembly. The matriarch of the wolves stepped forward. "What can we do, Guardian? Our dens may keep us safe, but what about the others?" Gus nodded, acknowledging her worry. "We need to work together like never before. Each species has unique skills that will be crucial for our collective survival." In the hours that followed, an ambitious plan began to take shape. The beavers proposed building a series of reinforced shelters along the creek, using their engineering expertise. The owls volunteered to form a surveillance network, alerting everyone about the storm's approach. The deer, with their deep knowledge of the forest, committed to guiding the smaller animals to safety. Anna, listening to all this, felt a pang of doubt. What could the tiny ants contribute in the face of such a great threat? She expressed her concern to Gus. The guardian smiled gently. Anna, more than anyone, you should know the power of small actions. Your ants can be the messengers, coordinating efforts among different groups. Moreover, your ability to work as a team and solve problems will be invaluable. Encouraged, Anna gathered her ants and began organizing communication and problem-solving teams. They spread throughout the forest, creating an efficient information network that kept all groups updated and coordinated. As preparations progressed, Gus faced his own internal challenge. As guardian, he knew he had to lead by example during the storm, flying in the most dangerous conditions to ensure everyone's safety. The thought frightened him, but he recalled his journey from a simple grasshopper to the protector of the forest. Each challenge had prepared him for this moment. As the day of the storm approached, the tension in the forest was palpable. Gus made constant rounds, checking preparations and offering words of encouragement. He noticed with pride how the different species worked together seamlessly, a testament to how much they had grown as a community. On the eve of the storm, Gus gathered with the leaders one last time. Tomorrow, we will face our greatest test, he said, looking into each of their eyes. But remember, our strength lies in our unity. Together we can overcome any obstacle. Anna, observing Gus at that moment, saw not only the powerful guardian, but also the friend who had grown so much since his days as a curious grasshopper. She felt a wave of pride and determination. "We are ready," she said, her voice firm despite her tiny size. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the forest, the animals retreated to their shelters. The air was heavy with anticipation and a biting chill that heralded the approaching storm. Gus remained high in a tree, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. He knew that the hours ahead would test everything they had built and learned. But looking down at the forest, seeing the results of their teamwork, the shelters, escape routes, and rescue teams prepared, he felt a wave of confidence. Whatever challenge the storm would bring, they would face it together. The forest of Maine, united under his leadership, was ready for its greatest test. The ice storm arrived with relentless fury. Howling winds swept through the Maine forest, carrying ice crystals that sliced like razors. The trees creaked under the weight of the ice accumulating on their branches, and the air was filled with the sound of wood cracking and breaking. Gus, the guardian of the forest, flew through the chaos, his brilliant wings cutting through the icy darkness. He battled against the gusts of wind, his eyes keenly searching for any sign of imminent danger or animals in distress. On the ground, the network of shelters and tunnels they had prepared was being tested to its limits. The beavers worked tirelessly to keep the structures intact, while the wolves patrolled the entrances, guiding stragglers to safety. Anna and her ants were in full action, their tiny forms defying the odds as they moved swiftly between shelters, relaying crucial messages and coordinating rescue efforts. Their teamwork and quick adaptability proved invaluable. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed through the forest. An ancient tree, its trunk weakened by the ice, began to fall toward the main shelter where dozens of animals had taken refuge. Gus, seeing the danger, dove toward the falling tree. He knew he didn't have the strength to stop its fall, but perhaps he could redirect its path. With a Herculean effort, he launched himself against the massive trunk, his wings glowing with intense light as he channeled all his guardian energy. The impact was tremendous. Gus felt as though every fiber of his being was being tested. For a terrible moment, it seemed his effort would be in vain. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, The tree began to change direction. With a deafening crash, it fell, barely grazing the shelter before slamming into the frozen ground. Gus, exhausted and injured, collapsed into the snow beside it. Anna, who had been nearby coordinating the evacuation of the shelter, rushed to her fallen friend. "Gus!" she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the howling wind. "You did it!" But the battle was far from over. The fall of the tree had created a breach in the protective network they had built. The cold wind began to penetrate the shelters, threatening the animals sheltered within. Gus, struggling to rise, knew they needed to act quickly. "Anna," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion, "we need to seal that gap. Gather everyone you can." Anna nodded, immediately mobilizing her ants. They spread out rapidly, summoning wolves, beavers, deer, and all other animals capable of helping. What followed was an extraordinary demonstration of cooperation and resilience. Wolves and deer worked side by side, moving pieces of wood and stones to create a barrier. The beavers applied their construction expertise, guiding the efforts to maximize stability. Anna's ants infiltrated the smallest spaces, sealing them with leaves and packed snow. Gus, regaining his strength, coordinated the efforts from above, his voice rising above the storm to direct and encourage. Hours dragged on, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The animals worked tirelessly, their bodies trembling from the cold and exhaustion. But in their eyes, a fierce determination shone through, a refusal to succumb to the forces of nature. Finally, when it seemed they could endure no more, the barrier was complete. The wind howled and roared outside, but within the reinforced shelters, the forest animals found themselves safe. Gus landed beside Anna, both exhausted but triumphant. Around them, animals of all species huddled together, sharing warmth and comfort. Wolves nestled against deer, squirrels snuggled among the soft fur of rabbits, and Anna's ants formed a protective network over all of them. "Look at them, Anna," Gus said softly. "See what we've built together." Anna nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "It's not just about surviving the storm," she replied. "It's about who we become in the process." As the storm continued to roar outside, a sense of unity and hope reigned within the shelters. Gus, watching the scene, felt a wave of pride and gratitude. This was the true miracle. Not just having survived the storm, but having created a community that was stronger and more united than ever. As the night wore on, the animals of the main forest rested together, secure in the knowledge that no matter what dawn brought, they would face it united. When dawn finally arrived, it brought with it a transformed world. The ice storm had passed, leaving behind a breathtaking landscape of crystal. Every branch, every leaf was encased in a layer of ice that shimmered under the first rays of the sun. Gus was the first to emerge from the shelters. He cautiously took to the sky, his wings breaking thin layers of ice as he stretched out. From above, he could see the full extent of the storm's impact. Trees had fallen, streams were frozen, and large expanses of the forest looked like a sea of glass. But amidst the destruction, Gus also saw signs of hope. The shelters they had built stood firm, testaments to the strength of a united community. He could already see movement below as the animals began to emerge and assess the situation. He landed back at the entrance of the main shelter, where Anna and the other leaders were already gathered. "The worst is over," Gus announced, "but we still have a lot of work ahead." In the weeks that followed, the main forest engaged in an unprecedented rebuilding effort. The damage was extensive, but the spirit of cooperation forged during the storm remained strong. Wolves and deer worked side by side to clear paths blocked by fallen trees. Beavers led teams to repair damaged dams and create new channels for water as the ice melted. Owls conducted reconnaissance flights, identifying areas that needed urgent attention. Anna's ants, with their incredible organizational skills, coordinated the efforts, ensuring that resources and labor were distributed efficiently throughout the forest. Gus soared overhead, his heart swelling with pride as he watched how the community he had helped build was not only surviving, but thriving in the face of adversity. One day, while overseeing the reconstruction of an eagle's nest that had been destroyed, Gus noticed something extraordinary. In the spot where the great tree had fallen during the storm, a small green shoot was emerging from the melting snow. He called Anna and the others to see. Together they watched this symbol of renewal and hope. "Look," Gus said, his voice gentle but filled with emotion. "The forest renews itself just like we do." Anna nodded, her antennae moving gently. "And it will grow stronger than ever," she added, "because now we know the power of what we can achieve together." As spring approached, bringing promises of new beginnings, the main forest found itself transformed. Not only physically with new trees growing and new paths being formed, but in spirit as well. Old rivalries between species had given way to deep mutual respect. The mindset of every creature for itself had been replaced by an ethos of community and mutual support. Gus, hovering over the reborn forest, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a simple, curious grasshopper to a guardian of the forest, he had learned that true strength comes not from individual power, but from the unity of many. And as the sun set that spring evening, casting a golden glow over the revitalized forest, Gus knew that no matter what challenges the future held, the main forest would face them united, stronger and more resilient than ever. Years passed since the great ice storm. The main forest flourished, becoming a beacon of harmony and cooperation in the natural world. The little sprout that Gus and Anna had observed grew into a majestic tree at the heart of the forest, a living symbol of rebirth and unity. Gus, still the vigilant guardian, watched with pride as new generations of animals grew up learning the lessons of cooperation and resilience. Anna, though aging, continued to lead her colony with wisdom. And on summer nights, when the breeze gently whispered through the trees, the elders could be heard telling the young ones the legend of the little ant and the grasshopper who transformed an entire forest. "Rest now, my darlings, and let your dreams take flight. I'll see you tomorrow with new adventures to share."